Hi, this is Érika from a small robot studio. Today I'm gonna show you how to sculpt a Korok from the Legend of Zelda in Nomad Sculpt. The first thing that I want to do is go into the shading menu and change it from PBR to Madcap. You can select a specific Madcap by tapping on the sphere. This is merely a lighting setup, which I find easier to work with. Now I'm gonna head to the scene menu and I am actually going to delete this by hitting into the three dots and tapping on delete. I'm gonna go now to add and select a cylinder. At the bottom, I am gonna select wire so I can see the grid that makes up the cylinder. I'm gonna open the topology menu, which is gonna let me modify this cylinder. In the topology section, I'll bring this number low and then parameter up by 1 or 2. This action will give me rounded corners in any primitive. Play with the two numbers to get a shape that is easier to start with. This seems close. I'm gonna stretch it a bit because my Korok is kinda tall. And here at the top, in radius, I'm gonna tap it. So I have two controllers, which will let me make the base wider than the top. And I'm gonna tap on validate. I am no longer able to modify its grid, but now I can sculpt on it. First thing, I'll use some smoothing to round the head even more. We want symmetry to be active. However, right now it's symmetrical only from left to right. I also want to affect the back. To do so, I'm gonna go into the symmetry menu. I have the x-axis active. I can see here what is going on. I'm also gonna tap on the z-axis. So now it's gonna be symmetrical on 2, which is gonna make the smoothing consistent all around. That works. So now that I'm done, I'm gonna deactivate the z-axis because usually you only need to work with one. Now, a Korok's design is inspired after roots. Right now, this looks like a tic-tac, so I'll use the move tool to break this even shape. From a side view, I'll flatten the face area with a slope that leads to a hanging belly. Its back will follow an S-curve instead, with its behind higher than the belly. Now from the front, the head will be thinner, but slightly squarer, while the bottom will be wider. By the way, I am not making this up. I am looking at references from the art book. Alright, next we're gonna create the legs by pulling them out of the body. And to do so, I am going to go into the topology menu and the third tab, Dino Topo. I'm gonna activate dynamic topology. Let's choose this smooth brush and make sure that Dino Topo here on the left is active. Now when I go on top on my mesh, see how it recalculates that grid. If I bring this detail slider higher, the polygons that it creates are gonna be even smaller. I don't need to go that crazy. I prefer to work as low poly as possible. The size of your brush is also going to affect this result. Now I'm gonna choose the drag tool, and from a side view, not from the center, but a tiny bit towards the back, I'm gonna pull the legs out. Perfect. We're still gonna modify this. Now I'm gonna turn off symmetry and I'm gonna create the roots from the head. The higher you bring your intensity, the more the mesh is gonna follow your brush. For each extraction, I am changing these values slightly, as well as the camera rotation. I want to make sure their width and height are unique, and that they are not symmetrical from the front and back. It might look like I get this done quite fast and easy, but don't let this video fool you. I repeat each step several times until I get a result I like. Don't forget, this is an edited video where I get to remove a lot of the mistakes. A big part of this process is getting used to the tools and how they feel. Anyway, we are not done. So let's disable dynamic topology and keep polishing, now with sculpting tools. Don't worry about the surface looking jagged. For now, let's focus on polishing the big volumes. For instance, enhancing the roundness of the legs or the fall of the belly. My favorite tools for organic surfaces are brush and flatten. On the other hand, if I want to make sharper lines and corners, I'm gonna use crease. Let's focus on the top. The volumes up here need cleaning up. Note how there are several breaks and how lumpy it looks. Smooth can be useful, but if I overuse it, it's gonna destroy volumes. I will have a lot more control by using the already mentioned tools. Brush to build up volume, flatten to even out surfaces, and crease to tidy up corners. One of the best ways to check if the shapes are clean is by focusing only on the silhouette. An easy way to do so is opening the shading menu and selecting Unlit. I can easily identify the shapes that look wobbly. I use this trick all the time in my day job creating video game assets. Once we have the main shape, now we can worry a bit more about the surface detail. So I'm gonna head into the topology menu, the second tab, voxel, and I'm gonna choose not too big, not too small, just enough to keep the details, nothing gets destroyed. Remesh. We lost some here at the top, so let's go back. And now that we have a uniform mesh, it's gonna be much easier to smooth it out. While smoothing, keep an eye on the silhouette. In general, this technique is working nicely, but for difficult areas, instead of smoothing over and over, go back to the brush and flatten tool. These tools are your best friends when it comes to polishing, as well as a nice podcast or a video in the background. At this point, I'm not really doing anything new. There's nothing too interesting to describe. It's only small tweaks here and there. So how about I take a moment to thank the amazing people that support the channel via Patreon. You peeps are the best. Thank you so much. Our supporters gain access to a growing library of assets that includes the models that I make in the tutorials. Learn more about it at patreon.com/smallrobotstudio. Let's move on and create the face leaf. For this, I am going to create a box. With the gizmo, I'm going to squish it to be quite thin and big enough to fit the leaf inside. Within the topology menu, I'll push up the resolution of the mesh. I'm going to go into a front view and I'm going to select my paint tool with symmetry on. And I'm going to sketch the shape that I want. This is a heart-shaped leaf. Next, we're going to select the trim tool with lasso as a creation method. Following the paint, I'm going to draw out the areas I don't want. Anything inside the white area is going to be taken out. Of course, if you have symmetry on, you only need to do one side. Perfect. I'm going to get rid of this paint by going into the paint menu. I'm going to select white and force paint all. Now again with the trim tool, but this time with polygon as a creation method, I'm going to tap and drag to create the shape of the hole for the nose. For extra control points, tap between the white dots. This creation method lets me fine-tune the shape before making the actual cut. And when you're ready to do it, simply tap on the green circle. Moving on, I'll pick the mask tool to draw the face. If this is looking too pixelated, you can go into the topology menu, multi-resolution, and subdivide once or even twice. Now we have enough resolution to draw this clearly. If you need to erase, use this side button. Once you're happy with what you draw, you're gonna go into the mask menu and select invert. Now I'm gonna select the gizmo tool and I'm gonna push this slightly back into the mask, against mask menu, and clear. For the little breaks around the edge, once again I'm going to sketch them with the paint tool to then cut them away with the trim tool. I'll fine-tune its position and then select the body again to make a mark where I'll pull the nose out from. With the solo button in the bottom, I'll isolate the body, and just like we did at the beginning with the legs, I'll pull the nose out with dynamic topology enabled. For the arms, we can follow the same approach, or if you wanted to pose them, Instead, I recommend using the tube tool. Similar to what we did before with trim, I'll select Path as a creation method, tap and drag to create a line, and use a green dot to create a tube geometry. Yet again, like I did earlier for the body. Inside the topology menu, I'll bring parameter up and topology down to get rid of the harsh corners. Now let's tap twice in radius, so each point has an independent size. Tapping in the line between other points, I'll add a few extra ones to get this arm a pear shape. Now with this arm selected, I'm going to go into the scene menu and I'm going to create an instance. This is going to create a lovely duplicate, which I can put in any position that I want. The cool thing about this is that if I modify the shape of one, the other one will follow, but the position is not an exact mirror. The last piece of this sculpt is the little branch the Korok will be hanging from. Once again, with the tube tool, I'll build the stem. When you tap the dots, they change between white and black. White means the shape will follow a curve, while black will create a corner. I like to vary between the two to keep the design interesting. I'll add a tiny branch coming off the stem, and of course, the midrib of the actual leaf. For the leaves, I'm going to use a plane instead of a box, because they are not as important as the face, and I don't want them stealing attention. Make sure you give them a good amount of resolution before validating them. Once again, I'll sketch the shape that I want, to then cut away the excess with the trim tool. But the trim tool is going to give me an odd result. This is because the plane is technically an open geometry, and the trim tool by default is set to close any hole. That's okay, this is an easy fix. Open the tool setting and disable close holes. The unacceptable behavior is now gone, so we can finish cutting away this shape. This leaf is too flat, so I'm gonna select the move tool. I'm gonna make it roughly as big as a leaf. I am gonna activate normal, tap on the center and drag up. That looks much nicer. And we can position our lovely leaf and edit the stem. For the final details, I'll create a few more tubes and follow the style of the concept art, where the veins poke out of the actual leaf, flaring up slightly. A helpful setting to have a tube stick to an existing surface is a snap. You'll find it in this floating menu. To create the second leaf, I'll take a shortcut. Hold down smooth, select all the tubes of the veins and the leaf. Now on the scene menu, I'll tap on the add button and group. This is going to create a folder with all these pieces. And once again, select instance to create this duplicate, rotate it, set it to the opposite side, slightly lower and maybe a tad smaller. To control the branch as a whole, I'm gonna select both groups and the stem, and yet again on add, group them. I'll do the same for all the pieces of the Korok. Now this is a bit too many groups, so I recommend naming them using the 3 dots in the scene menu. By selecting these groups and using the gizmo, we can begin the very last step, posing. To make this non-destructive, I'm gonna go into the layers menu and tap on add layer. In this way, any adjustment that I make, I can easily revert if I change my mind. So I'm gonna select with the mask the leg, go into the menu, blur, invert, and with the gizmo I'm gonna rotate a bit and adjust the position, just thinking about how gravity would be pulling this leg. It's not gonna be perfect, there's gonna be some sculpting polishing afterwards. Back to the mask and clear this. I'll follow the same steps for the other leg. When doing these adjustments, make sure you zoom out to see the sculpt as a whole. Something might look good when focusing on just a detail, but when you see it as a whole, it might stand out weirdly. Perfect! These legs look way more natural. The body is still a bit stiff though, especially when I see it from the back. So I am going to use the move tool with a big brush to shift it slightly, thinking again of how gravity is affecting this pose. Now that we have sorted out the big volumes, we can polish the rest with our favorite sculpting tools. In my case, brush, crease, and flatten. Remember to work from big to small. Even when working on the smaller details, make sure to avoid tunnel vision by constantly zooming out and inspecting the model from all angles. Anyway, we are done. This Korok is ready to find a nice hiding place in Hyrule. As always, feel free to tag me in social media when sharing your work. I would love to see your creations, whether you're making a Korok too, or using these techniques in other projects. I'll see you soon in a new tutorial. Happy sculpting! That's it for this tutorial. If you find it useful, make sure that you leave a like so other people can find it. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, as we are bringing out CG and illustration tutorials every week. Become a patron and access tutorial assets, bonus content, a private Discord, and more by clicking in the link below.